After just 8 championship games in charge, Danny Schofield has been sacked as Huddersfield Town boss. Get your thoughts in below as Schofield becomes the second firing of the championship season. What next for Huddersfield? Schofield took charge of Huddersfield on the eve of the new season after Carlos Corberán left the club. There was a big sense of Corberán sort of getting out of dodge with his stock extremely high after the Terriers jumped an incredible 17 places from 20th all the way up to 3rd and ultimately lost in the playoff final last season. Schofield was a highly rated coach at the club, but this was his first job as a head coach. And he admitted himself the change had come earlier than expected. That Corberán team that lost in the playoffs surprised many, me included, but they were excellent with the set plays of Sorba Thomas and Daniel Sinani. They went on a giant undefeated run mid-season. They got the best out of stalwart striker Danny Ward and developed excellent players, namely Lewis O'Brien and Harry Toffolo. The reality was that team would be broken up very quickly under the nose of Schofield, with the key departures of O'Brien and Toffolo both sold to playoff final conquerors Nottingham Forest. Loney Sinani also returned to Norwich. There have been plenty of arrivals, but this sense that a new team needed building after one that had already surpassed expectations was one that had many looking on with concern. I was there in the flesh for Huddersfield's championship opener against Burnley. Check the vlog here and see if I said anything prophetic. And the sense that Schofield wasn't quite ready was reinforced. He didn't react to a Burnley side circulating the ball unchallenged in the deep midfield spots. And all this whilst Premier League legend Vincent Kompany aggressively owned the touchline right next to him. Another defeat at Birmingham followed before Schofield got his only win as Huddersfield boss over Stoke, and unwittingly in the process made sure he wouldn't be the first boss sacked this season, as Michael O'Neill only lasted a couple more games at Stoke. It was then 4 defeats in the next 5 for Schofield and for Huddersfield, with last night's home defeat against last season's League One champions Wigan leaving Huddersfield second bottom to a Coventry side experiencing fixture chaos and with 3 games in hand. The trigger was pulled this morning. We'll get into the whys and what nexts after I just ask you if you wouldn't mind hitting the thumbs up button on the video and supporting the channel. In defence of Danny Schofield, a quick scan of the tweet announcing the firing from Huddersfield did have a fair few sympathetic responses. The terms thrown in at the deep end and thrown under the bus came up a few times, let's just say. Now, look, far from giving these as reasons, I will add that Schofield did come up against 3 of the dreaded parachute teams in his first 5 games in charge. He had 2 games postponed due to reasons that were way out of his control, and he, of course, experienced the failure of goal line tech in that home defeat against Blackpool. I will also say that this was a really tough gig for anybody right from the outset, following what will likely end up looking like a big outlier season, and with key components of that team being quickly dismantled. Yes, a lot of moving parts for a rookie manager to deal with. Of course, Schofield failed. I don't really think that's the nature of the debate we need to have right now. The results tell us that very emphatically. But are the Huddersfield fans right to say that he was thrown under the bus? I think they probably are. Yes, Corberán's decision to leave left the club in a really tricky spot, really close to the start of the season. But perhaps they took the convenient option with Schofield already in-house, and he's ultimately going to end up as the fall guy for whoever does come in next. Let me know who you think that might be. Lots of shouts for David Wagner returning in my short scroll on social media. Huddersfield fans will be sick of the comparison to Barnsley last season, but unfortunately a lot of the same things are happening. Quick rise up the table and then defeat in the playoffs. Both Corberán and Ismail, obviously at Barnsley, not in situ at the start of the next season. For O'Brien and Toffolo leaving Huddersfield, Reid, Mowat and DK leaving Barnsley. And now Schofield leaving in the early season does have echoes of Marcus Schopp. Remember him? Obviously, look, every situation is unique, but this overarching narrative of a steep rise being followed by a steep fall is something that we've spoken about a lot on the channel, and even the most emotionally invested Huddersfield fans would be remiss not to consider that even the smallest of possibilities. To conclude, my feelings are somewhat split here between sympathy for Schofield and for Huddersfield a little bit, as it was a tricky situation for both parties at the start of the season. There's obviously criticism for what was clearly the wrong hire here, and now I've got a bit of apprehension into the mix, as this next appointment has to be exactly the right one, else we know what the consequences could be. Get your views in down there in the comments on the situation at Huddersfield and what should happen next there. For a bit more background on the situation, you can watch my video on Carlos Corberan's pre-season walkout right here. And you can also click here to see my take on some happier times up at Huddersfield as I analyse how they made the playoffs last season.